May we begin with a word of prayer, please. God, we thank you that you have created this day in order for us to be a part of one another's lives, to be a part of your life, your Spirit's life, to be a part of love for each other, laughter with each other, a time of friendship with each other. We pray your special blessings in this time together as we discuss what it means in one sense to be called by you in a ministry, a mission, to care for your creation. In Christ's name we pray, amen. Well, welcome. My name is Pat Watkins. I've been a missionary most lately. I'm a clergy person in the church, retired. Most recently, a missionary with our mission board, the General Board of Global Ministries, the one and only missionary that Global Ministries assigned to the care of God's creation. It's a pretty cool job for a while, sort of to try to convince our mission board and convince the church at large that caring for God's creation is a valid and appropriate mission of the church. It was met with some success, some frustration, but we are doing some cool things. So that's me. We have two more people in this workshop. Mike Koob is here because I asked Mike to be here because he started a creation care team in the Baltimore, Washington annual conference, and or at least one of his emphases there is advocacy. So I wanted him to be here, sort of that advocacy team illustration. J.D. Hansen is here. He started a team at his local church. So I'm going to talk a bit about annual conference teams. I'll talk about all kinds of teams. And then we have a local church illustration team, another annual conference illustration team. It's dangerous that the three of us are doing this together because we all can talk for a long time. So I'm going to time us. I'm going to time all three of us. We're going to try to limit our remarks to no more than 10 minutes because I'd really like I'd like us to have some dialogue. Some of you might be creation care team starter wannabes. And can we help you in your particular context to get started? Some of you have teams that are going great that you can share with each other. Some of you have teams that are probably terribly frustrating and aggravating and you're ready to quit. And maybe we can help with that too. So I want us to be responsive to where you are in this journey of how you're getting your teams up and running. Is that an okay agenda for us? Okay. All right. The timer is turning on for me. All right. So I'm just going to talk. I'm going to give you just a whole plethora of tips and tricks and things that I think are important. But keep in mind that there is no one size that fits all here. And so the things that I have gleaned over the years that have been helpful to me may not be so helpful to you. So take that with a grain of salt. So I'm not going to tell you how you have to do this. In other words, I'm just going to share some thoughts and ideas with you. So the first thing you do, I think, and it was interesting, Heather would suggest this as well. I loved what she said. The first thing you do if you want to start a creation care team in your local church, particularly in the local church, don't start with the issues. Don't put a blurb in your bulletin that says, everybody meet Sunday afternoon, we're going to watch An Inconvenient Truth. That ain't the way to go about starting. Start with biblical faith. In Virginia, churches would say, how do we get started? What should we do? Everybody wants to know what we should do as a team. Spend 6 weeks on some Bible study that studies the care of God's creation for your team. So once you assemble a group of interested people in your local congregation, do a Bible study before you do anything else. That's my suggestion. For an annual, who's United Methodist in here? Is that everybody? Is there anybody who is not a United Methodist? Okay, and what kind of people are you? Okay, all four of you? Okay. But we're all Christians and we're all church-related people then. Okay, so this should apply, almost all of this will apply to all of us. I may be a little United Methodist specific once or twice, but not very much. Okay. So, and for us in our system, we're divided up geographically into annual conferences, similar to a diocese or another judicatory kind of grouping of congregations. And so United Methodists do a whole lot of stuff on the annual conference level. And so for an annual conference team or a judicatory kind of a team, for us, it's helpful. It's not totally necessary, but it's helpful to connect your team to some legitimate organization within the annual conference. It could be the Conference Board of Church and Society. It could be United Methodist Women. It could be the Mission and Outreach, whatever your annual conference calls that. If you can keep it connected like that, then there's more of a sense of legitimacy to it. And this is my experience in Virginia. I've started 2 conference teams, one in Virginia and one in North Carolina. In Virginia, the Conference Board of Church and Society had an environmental justice working group within it. And I became chair of that working group, and I asked the chair of Church and Society, do I have to call it environmental justice, or can I change the name? And do I only have to use Church and Society board people to be on my team? And they said, you can change the name and you can put anybody you want to on the team. So in Virginia, we have listservs, clergy listserv, email listservs for clergy, for laity, for UMW, for youth, on and on and on. So all I did, this is very simple and easy. I sent an email out on all of our listservs with the question, does anybody out there care about God's creation? That was literally what I asked. Does anybody care about God's creation? And I immediately had 40 replies. Not everybody was willing to be on a conference team, but I had 40 people initially say, hey, I think that's a great idea. I'm interested. I want to be on your team, or I don't have time to be on the team, but I'm supportive, et cetera, et cetera. Very easy. And then we just had a meeting. Then I just scheduled a meeting and sent an email to those 40 people, and I said, come to a meeting. And that's how we got started. It was easy in Virginia. The other experience in Virginia is that I didn't ask the bishop if I could do this. I didn't ask any of the conference staff. I asked nobody's permission to do this. I just did it because it was a passion of mine, and I just knew there were other people in Virginia that cared, and I'm just getting us together. So it was completely and totally grassroots. And you can ask your bishop if you want to, that's fine. You can get the blessing of the bishop. That did happen in North Carolina, but you don't have to. You don't have to. And in Virginia we started completely grassroots, and we eventually were recognized by the bishop and the conference leadership, and we eventually passed a resolution at annual conference that legitimated our team. In North Carolina, yeah, it was a long time ago, so Virginia's been going for a long time. In North Carolina, it worked differently because the bishop in North Carolina decided she wanted a creation care team for the North Carolina annual conference. She knew I had retired in North Carolina, so she asked me if I would start a team. So very, very different ways that those two teams started. In Virginia, we just did it completely grassroots. In North Carolina, it came from the bishop down. So again, just two different ways of doing it, and whatever works in your setting. I remember years ago, a guy from South Carolina wanted to start a team in his annual conference. He wrote a letter to the bishop asking her permission to start a team, and he never got a reply from her. And so he assumed then there would be no team in South Carolina. And I got in his face and I said, how stupid is that? Come on, do it anyway. You don't need the bishop. So you have to figure out in your context, in your setting, what works best for you. So let me have a show of hands. How many of you are on an annual conference team or would like to start one on the annual conference level? Oh, so not very many of you. So the rest of you are more focused on local church teams. Is that correct? Okay. Yep, you have a... Great idea. Yeah. Yeah. Great idea. So if we have time, I can give you a long list of examples of things that churches are doing and have done. Very creative things like that. We're a creative bunch of people, and this ministry is pretty new to most of our churches. So the more creative we can be with it, the better we are. Okay, so more specifically for a local church team, again, sorry to the Catholics and Episcopalians. In the United Methodist Church, we have a book of discipline. You probably have heard of it before. It's sort of the law book of our denomination. The book of discipline includes a long list of committees that a local church can have. It's not a list of committees that a local church has to have, but it's a list of committees that the denomination has endorsed as legitimate if you want to do this in your local church. And one of them is called an Earth Advocacy Committee. So if you want to start a green team in your congregation, and somebody has a problem with that in your local church, you can say, oh, but the discipline already has said we can have an Earth Advocacy Committee. So the United Methodist Church has made that clear. If you want to have a green team in your local church, do it. Go for it. And and the same works in the local church as on the conference level. If you can connect the team with something else that's already happening in the local church, that's helpful. It's not always necessary, again, but it's helpful. If you can connect it with mission or with your justice group or whatever in your local congregation, then it's helpful. And try to get because the discipline has legitimated your team already, then you can go to to your council on ministries or administrative whatever the governing body is of your local church, and get a seat on that board as a representative of this Earth Advocacy Committee. Yeah, go to, because you have already been legitimated according to the Book of Discipline, you deserve to have a position on your administrative council or administrative board or whatever you call it. Yes, your church council, yes. You need to have a seat there by virtue of the fact that you're the chair of the Creation Care Ministry team of that church. And then this is the last thing. I've got far more to say, but try, if you can, to get a couple of representatives of other committees in the local church on your team. Like if you can get a trustee, somebody from finance, the worship committee, the education committee, the youth, United Methodist Women, and others, if you can get representatives from some of the other organizations within the local church, that will help the creation ministry be more infused into the complete and total life of the congregation. There is a challenge that you not be seen as these crazy left-wing tree huggers over here in the corner of the fellowship hall bitching about styrofoam. You know, we got to do better than that. We got to be more infused into the total life and ministry of the congregation. Okay, I'm past time. So, yeah. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. So, yeah, particularly if you are a legitimate ministry committee of the church, you have a seat on your church council, and so you're deserving of involving yourself in the budget process. So there should be a line item in your budget for your committee. Yes. Thank you, Carl. Okay. I don't know which one of you wants to go next. Come on. All right, Mike. Again, this is Mike Hood from the Baltimore, Washington Annual Conference.
So Baltimore, Washington, we have about 635 churches. And I actually took a different tack than Pat described. I got into this issue-oriented. My first issue was fossil fuel divestment, which was something we tried to promote denominational-wide, trying to get our pension outfit that manages $22 billion, now $24 billion, to not invest in fossil fuels. So it was a question in the annual conference at our session to get enough people to support a resolution and a petition to General Conference on this. So a lot of organizing. This was my kickoff several years ago. There was not an organized group identified anywhere that I could find, although later on I found a lot of people were working in different aspects of creation care, which that was the most challenging thing to me, is to find people that already had an innate sense that this was really crucial and critical. It was continuing to ask people and talk to people, and the fact that when you present a resolution, there's a process that has to you go through. In our conference, it's big enough where we have to present it very early on, 5 months ahead of time, to our connectional table, and it has to be published. And then I went to Church and Society, which there were some people in Church and Society, and those people knew other people. And so I started developing an increasing email list of people that I could reach out to, and really going crazy on social media. I did know a lot of people in the conference already because I had, through our our retreat and camping ministry, I was on staff there for quite a while, so I knew a lot of pastors and lay people. That helped me to know some people, but they didn't necessarily end up. I also knew a lot of people through our local effort under Reconciling Ministries Network. In Baltimore, it's called Be Warm. I had been with that group a long time, so that crossed a lot of the conference. So people did know me, and people did know my wife too, which was very helpful. I worked on other campaigns, and again, I saw the United Methodist Church as a natural ally and a natural part of the coalition about banning fracking in Maryland. And we worked with Interfaith Power and Light. And they knew some United Methodists that I didn't know. So that was helpful. There were several other campaigns that we worked on that were successful at a state level. I was very happy about that. Right now, how we're organized is that our conference has organized around our director of connectional ministry is in charge of a group called Action and Advocacy. And there's about 8 different things that we're officially recognized as advocating for, Creation Care being one of them. So we have a team, Creation Care, Advocacy, and Action team, which I'm the chair of. And so that's our formal relationship with the Baltimore-Washington Conference. I send out emails. We have a Facebook presence. We have had face-to-face meetings of our team, but we really rely on conference calls, monthly or every 6 weeks. Currently, our most recent call was to try and mobilize people around an annual event called Climate in the Pulpit, which Interfaith Power and Light backs up on, resources us with bulletin inserts. The big ask is to ask, I'm a layperson, the big ask is to get pastors to address it in the pulpit, either themselves or a guest preacher or invite an earthkeeper to preach. That doesn't happen so often, but it doesn't preclude you from doing an education session on a Sunday. I do believe in showing movies. I think movies are great. I've shown a whole series of movies that have been offered by Interfaith Power and Light. My green T-shirt here is the Sierra Club. I'm a church person that goes to the Sierra Club, but I think it's really, there's a certain traction in being able to say this movie came from Interfaith Power and Light, from a faith perspective, and not from a secular group. Partnering with the United Methodist Women, the climate justice study, I've given that. I'm a certified or study leader. In our denomination, you know that there's a certification process to teach that. It doesn't preclude you from teaching it if you're not certified, but I've taught that 4 times. I'm going to teach it again this coming winter. And I'm an earth keeper. That gives it, I really encourage anybody that really wants to dig deep is to look at the Earth Keeper program seriously. You know, if you're called to a vocation, why not let the church train you and commission you to do this work? I'm going to stop there.
So this is really good because I did it one way and Mike did it a very different way. One reason why is because I'm who I am and Mike is who he is. That's one reason why. And he has particular expertise in advocacy work that I don't have. So that's another, when we get to talking about what your teams could or should do, I think the best advice I have is you do whatever you know how to do, and you base what the team does on the expertise and the knowledge and the passions of the particular people that are on your team. That's how you determine what the team does. Don't try to impose some agenda on your team that has nothing to do with who these people are that want to be a part of it. So any questions for Mike?
The course that you got certified to train, can you repeat that again?
3 years ago, the United Methodist Women, in conjunction with their current emphasis on climate justice, published a book called Climate Justice. Pat is the editor and the author of Chapter 1 of an 8-chapter book, and he mentioned it in his introduction. So it's a climate justice study through the United Methodist Women. There aren't any other certification courses available. There was just 1 year to get the study leaders out. But.
And a copy of the book is downstairs on the UMW table. You can take a look at it.
Yes. It's an excellent resource. It starts out Chapter 1 very strong, and Chapter 2 on theological grounding. And, it's out of print, but you can get Kindle edition. And sometimes you can ask around in your conference, because some people have extra copies, and I've done that.
And I have some extra copies too. I brought some here, but they're already spoken for. I have maybe 15 or 20. That's all I have left. But I'm happy to mail you some. You just have to promise me that you'll teach it if I mail you one. But yes.
Every jurisdiction also has a Just Be Green jurisdictional guide through United Methodist Women, and they may also have copies. So you might want to check that out as well.
Yes. Yes. So so United Methodist Women, they're a great resource. United Methodist Women has climate justice as one of their 4 priorities for their whole organization. So UMW people should be all over this. It doesn't mean that the UMW people in your local church are cognizant of that, but as an organization within the church, United Methodist Women, they're doing incredible work in this field.
Paris to Pittsburgh, yes, and I showed that last month. Got a great turnout whenever I show a film in my local congregation setting. I invite the wider community, try to get as many people in there. And so what if the Sierra Club shows up? That's okay. I tell my pastor we're getting people into the church who'd never step foot otherwise.
And I love that. It really can be evangelism. Oftentimes I have been invited to be a part of the Sierra Club or other secular environmental organizations. When they first started inviting me 20 years ago, it felt like all they wanted was God on their side, and I felt used and abused. But that relationship has really evolved and matured beautifully over the years to the extent that many people in the secular environmental community believe that if we could only when we can get the faith communities involved will we ever be successful. So it's really fun for me to be able to take my Christian faith into secular environmentalism and explain to people why it's important to me to do what I do. It's great fun to do that. It's always fun to take the church into places it has never been before. Okay, JD is from Arlington, Virginia. He's going to talk about a local church creation care team at Mount Olivet UMC.
Well, good morning. I think one of the things that is important to do is to remember our calling. At Mount Olivet, I got called to do this work by Monty Campbell. And Monty was the head of stewardship committee, and every church has some person who cannot be refused. And I tried to refuse Monty's suggestion. She said, okay, JD, I know you've been taking care of your mom as she's been dying, and she's buried now. And so I've got another project for you. You know, I didn't want to disturb you when I knew you had other things to do, but you know, you have done this professionally for a long time. I worked for the General Board of Church and Society on these issues, and you're not doing that anymore, so you have time for your local church. And I think we need to start an environmental stewardship committee, and we've talked, and you're to be the chair of it. And I said, let me think about it. And then of course I said yes. And we're just getting started when Katrina hit. And one of the things that Karen McAfish will know, because I took one of her daughters down on one of those trips to Katrina, is that we made sure that every one of our trips reflected on the environmental crisis that New Orleans and Mississippi was going through as part of educating that. And after Katrina work, we formally started the committee in 2006. And by 2008, we decided it was time to ask to be a freestanding committee. And by that time, I had already connected with people like Pat Watkins and Carl Bren and several other people on the conference. And what we devised at the conference was we were going to have a Green Church initiative, and we required church councils to vote that you had become a green church. And so at Mount Olivet, we voted to become a green church in 2008, and have been making a report on our activities ever since, based on a model that Carl Bren developed, which is a little more extensive than what most local churches would. We have a 12-page report for this year. I have some copies. I'm not going to hand them out. But regardless of that, I think the important thing that we've done is we have 5 categories of work that we try to do every year. The first is worship. We only have one absolute requirement, and that is that we have at least one service a year that explicitly is about caring for God's creation. And now, not all of our pastors have been equally supportive of this mandate that worship be greened, but most of them have. And the one that wasn't so supportive, ironically, is the only one that asked me to preach the sermon. But we have been doing work on worship, education, stewardship, which is mostly church building stewardship more than anything else. Evangelism for all of the churches in the Virginia Conference is, other than River Road that claims a Waterloo Journal as bringing men into the church, but evangelism, has proven to be one of the harder points that we at Mount Olivet have had. I honestly cannot point to any clear new members that have joined our church because we're a green church. I keep looking for them. And then the last area is mission and outreach. and we're doing pretty good. And not every year do we do as well as the last year. One of the reasons I really wanted us to become a formal committee of the church council, not just a subcommittee. If we stayed a subcommittee, there was no real requirement that our chairs and members had to change. At least at Mount Olivet, if you're a formal committee, you can have extra members, but the official members are appointed by the Leadership and Development Committee. And so we're now in our fourth set of chairs on the committee, which is a wonderful thing. And we've had different personalities chairing. Our outgoing chair is quite an introvert, but he has stepped up to the job. He is less of an introvert than he was before he became chair of our committee, and he's done wonderful things, and he's going to get a PhD in mycology now. If you ever need to know anything about mushrooms, our Spirit in Nature walks focus more on mushrooms than any other walks in the country. And fortunately, I paid attention, so I know where the mushrooms grow now and what they're called. But the challenge, I think, is how to keep going. And there's a line from the ordination service of Buddhist monks that probably should be used for earth keepers too, which is a person having once decided to follow the way will become weak and slip off the path. And therefore assist one another, and together you can stay on the path. That's the reason to have a committee in your church, and the reason to have it as an organized part of your church is that you get new ordinands all the time that have new ideas for how to do it. And our new chair is an extrovert, and she will get people in shape, and there'll be deficiencies that she's identified that we will correct soon. So I'm glad that we will have another 3 years of a new chair doing it a different way, but lifting it up. And she's much more willing to do. I'm stalking her on her Facebook page, and she's just been demonstrating on immigration stuff, and she's interested in having us do more on fracking, which the conference is doing, but our local church hasn't been too involved in it. So I'm excited about our future in our local church, but it's because we became a formal structure. And when it first started, people were saying, well, we have to think about what JD would do. And I said, no, the important thing for us as Christians is what would JC do? And I'll stop there. We have a 12-page report that you're welcome to purview. We don't, in the Virginia Conference, require this report anymore because only Mount Olivet was filling it out. Everybody else was, but Mount Olivet is that kind of church. So, and I will, sure. Yeah, evangelism. Yeah, well, they are worship, discipleship/education, stewardship, evangelism, and mission. And at the conference level, what we require a church to do if they are a green church is, one, hold a worship service, do at least one thing in these 5 areas every year, and send money to the conference caretakers. And Mount Olivet sends $750 a year. And
So then I would piggyback the question on that.
Yep.
What would you estimate is the percentage of your conference churches that participate and have a green?
Nominally, it's about 100 churches out of 1,200 have made a commitment or have a green team. About 20% of those, about 20, are quite active, I would say. But we have one of our earth keepers, Ellen, has been working hard to organize other churches in her areas. It's not an easy task, but there are funny ways we ended up doing it. When I taught at the United Methodist Women's School, one of my class members learned about becoming a green church and got her church signed up, and they ended up being one of our green churches at annual conference this year. So, yeah, sure.
So a couple of things that JD said. These 5 areas, I think, really are important, and I'm so glad you said that and brought this stuff. Those 5 areas are another way of making sure that your team can engage the total and complete ministry of the church. I mean, who would think that creation care has anything to do with evangelism? But it does, and it can. So to focus your team in those different areas gives you a much broader ministry in the church. And this is a document called the Green Church Initiative that see, this document originated from the annual conference team, and then this document was made available to local church teams in the Virginia conference. And now in North Carolina, we've stolen it. And we're using it in North Carolina, and you could steal it too if you like. No, I don't think so, but my email address is here. And if you have more questions or want any of this information, please email me and I'll get back to you. Some churches really love this because it has a gazillion things that a church can possibly do. So some churches love that. Other churches look at it and are so completely overwhelmed, they don't want to have anything to do with it. And other churches look at it and say, you ain't going to tell me what to do. And so, you know, just like creation care teams and individuals who lead them have unique personalities, so do churches, so do congregations, you know that. And so part of your task is to assess the personality of your congregation, to know the congregation so that you'll know what might work well and what might not.
On the Virginia Annual Conference website, there is a Caretakers of God's Creation page. On that page, there's the short form of this, the 2-page version, not the extensive version. We decided to put that on so people did not feel intimidated, but as they want more ideas, then we send them the long form.
Yes.
Just a quick comment on sharing information. I think, and I hope that one of the main motivations to setting up the hive
Yes.
we've been talking about
Yes.
this week is to have a place, a repository to put stuff like that.
Yes. Yes.
So we can all just, we've got a repository now that's growing really fast as a result.
Right.
Maybe this would be the
Yeah. And currently there is no network of chairs of annual conference creation care teams, and there should be. We should have that too. Yes. Yeah.
That were really key, and the ones that he was driving off in his efficiency thing. And the other thing is, when we're communicating with the congregation, where I'm at now, and Nick was there too, is a mix of conservative and liberal. And you always run into, well, this is environmental, and conservatives turn you off.
Right.
We used to use the argument of, well, it's good for the environment, but it's also good financially because they're saving.
Right. Right.
It also helps us use that argument.
Yeah. So,
People are trying to block what you're trying to do.
yes. So that financial argument is good. The biblical argument is too. That's why I always say, let's start with Scripture.
Many churches are declining.
Yes. Yes.
The second chair of our Mount Olivet committee was a Republican nuclear engineer who had just immediately before been chair of our trustees. And so the conservative guys felt really comfortable with Howard. And we didn't have, but one guy continued to give us kickback on issues, but he just likes to argue.
Yeah, Dan?
Just to follow with Steve's comment, yeah, the building manager, that was Franklin. And Franklin, if you know anything about Franklin, it's about as Republican as the country comes. And, but the solar panels on top that have been blessed.
Yep. Yep.
Huge energy efficiency and all of that. So it's,
Yeah, we have a church in North Carolina that changed all its light bulbs to LEDs all at one time. It's a pretty large church. They're saving about $11,000 a year just in electricity. Yeah, Carl.
Pat, I want to mention one thing that we did before we used, beans from Applebud, is we started a Earth and Spirit Sunday school class. And that went on for 12 years, something like that. And it was a constant presence about this issue at the church.
Yeah.
And one of the rules, or I wouldn't call it a rule, but one of the things that my wife and I decided, every class or every had something to do with our faith or with the faith. And one of the books that we used as for that was a Sierra Club book. They've got a great book on
Yeah.
creation care.
Yes.
I don't even know if it's still in print, but it's a wonderful one.
Yeah.
But Sunday school class gives, and then when I learned from JD that you had to have an actual committee, we proceeded immediately to go before the church council and get that done.
Yeah.
And that gave us another status.
So,
Having a connection, and I think your suggestion is a very good one. Always, if you can, have a connection to the church in different ways.
yeah. So that was a great model, I think, at River Road in Virginia. It started with the Sunday school class. So this guy, Carl Bryn, just decided we can teach a class in this stuff. So he and his wife started a Sunday school class and to study the biblical theology of creation care. And it was out of that Sunday school class that the team emerged for that local church. So that was a good, I think that's a great way to do it as well, is to start a new Sunday school class. They usually won't tell you you can't start a Sunday school class. Yes, exactly. I think Carla has had her hand up.
What is my title? Oh, I am speaking today.
You don't have another 10 minutes to tell them this, JD.
The reason I don't get offered to preach too often is that I go a little longer than usual. But that's not my title. I am at Mount Olivet right now. I'm lay leader, but I am a lay leader appointed to the Caretakers of God's Creation Committee currently. But I've been a volunteer. After I rotated off chair, I continued as a volunteer on the committee. Mount Olivet United Methodist in Arlington, 1500 North Glebe, 7/10 of a mile from Ballston Metro. You can either walk or, Karen's saying I'm going on too long, but I know I am.
And your service is at 11?
We have an 8:30 service for the early risers, and we have two 11 o'clocks.
Okay, Who hasn't? Nancy, I think you're.
I was just going to say, we just started our team in January. Of course, Pat was a big part of our team in our church. But we also have the document GCI. But as chairperson, I met with each leader of the worship areas, worship and all that. And I met with them individually, and I said, this is what creation care is coming from, but I want you to read through and talk with your committee to see if you are agreeable before I even presented it at church council, because I needed to know if they would be on board. And we had every area is 100% for it.
Yeah.
But I took the time, instead of just taking it to church council and saying, let's go for it.
Right.
That way they had time to look at it and read
Right.
it, because it has some excellent ideas.
Right. Right. Good example. And if you take the Green Church Initiative, then you can do whatever you want to with it. You can add things, you can change things that suit you. I mean, Nancy's on the coast of North Carolina, so their stuff is different than somebody in Kansas, for goodness sake. So they're going to have maybe some different emphases, and so it's important to be cognizant of that too. And again, the Green Church Initiative is a good document, but it ain't a one-size-fits-all document either. So you just have to do some creativity stuff. Yes.
So I'm from Foundry United Methodist in DC, and I'm just curious. You know, I'm hearing so many different terms thrown around, right? Like caretakers of creation, creation care, eco-justice,
Earth keepers.
Yeah, all of these things. And there has been some talk at Foundry about how the term creation care is not necessarily a good fit for us because we're very, very justice focused at Foundry.
Yes.
You know, and so the term eco-justice tends to resound more with
Yes.
folks. But is it important? Do you think it's important that we're consistent?
No.
Okay.
No. You call it what you want to. Different churches call their teams all kinds of different things. Yes.
In regards to your exciting group uniform and faith and justice, it involves creation, but it's even much more than that. But it works for us. We're the mission statement. I'd love to share that with you.
Sure. I mean, we have a whole department of social justice. Under that, we have a group called Sacred Resistance, and it's under our eco-justice team is going to be under that umbrella. So,
But ours involves immigration as well. It's health issues.
Yeah, and I think that's really good, because we all know that climate stuff is related to all other stuff. And the United Methodist Church has a great document that came out in 2009. Most of us don't know about it, called God's Renewed Creation. It was a production of the Council of Bishops. God's Renewed Creation, a call to hope and action. And in that document, the bishops list 3 issue areas of mission of the church: pandemic, poverty, and disease, environmental degradation, and the proliferation of weapons and violence. But the cool thing about it is the bishops are saying, unless we understand the interconnectedness of these 3 issue areas of mission, we will never be effective at transforming the world. And so yeah, there is a danger for all of us creation people to kind of, insulate ourselves. And when your team is a part of a larger justice team, I think that's really wonderful. I think that's very, very good and helpful. Yes.
Well, I think the environmental stewardship model versus the eco-justice does resonate really well with particular groups and congregations because of strong biblical emphasis. I think that is something that can get lost sometimes in the emphasis on stewardship at the expense of any justice.
Yes. Yes.
That's how it's interconnected, how it actually relates to
Right.
other issues.
Right. And so if we're cognizant of that, then we can also we can be the ones to build some bridges among those other issue areas of the church. Yeah.
Speaking to what you were saying about foundry, I was part of the communications group yesterday, and we was dealing with the central hub, and one of the things we're trying to do is begin to bring together all the fragmented elements within the church that are dealing with creation care under one umbrella. And so hopefully that will be helpful as we move forward with that. It's going to take time, but beginning to not so much standardize, but at least provide through United Methodist communications a clarity out to do that. Also, in regard to the annual conference dream team, in North Texas, we did ours in 2009, and I'm going to update the template of the legislation that we passed, and I'll put that on my high price.
Okay.
Thing if anybody's interested in that.
Okay. Yeah, if we do have a network and can begin to share some of what this, if we can take this conversation out there on the web, we can keep it going. No, do the Hive Bright thing. Karen?
I was on the task force team yesterday that was looking at ways that we could help to organize at the annual conference level. And one of the ideas that came out was to look at district hubs as a way of helping churches to connect with churches in their local areas. So I'm going to put it out there to both of you and Mike, you as well. Is that an active model now? Are there churches working with sister brother churches around them within the Methodist Church and maybe also interfaith?
Yes, Nancy's a good example. Y'all are working with Ocean View. Yeah.
I'll go back and I'll report from this conference to them.
Yeah, so yes, that is going on and should be going on, in my opinion. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
West Tennessee does not have a network.
Okay.
We're a 20-year-old unity in our church, but we do not have an annual conference. And so my conference
Team. Yeah.
How important is it to have that to get other churches involved?
It's not necessary, but I think it's a nice thing, and it can be a helpful thing. So maybe your crowd, after you've been in business for 20 years, can think about a conference team, how to put a conference team together.
Yeah, but you're also working with the Tennessee conference.
Oh, yeah. So you're going to inherit a team for your annual conference. Yes. But it's also important to think outside of your church walls. There was a great church in Virginia, and their team had been going for some time, been working on recycling and styrofoam and all that internal church stuff that all these teams do. And then they'd been doing that for a long time, and then they decided they were going to become a beacon. That's what they called themselves. They were going to become a beacon and reach out to other congregations in their area because they had something to offer to them. Yep. Yes, Bob?
Well, yeah, I also would say that we have developed a certified lay training program on environmental stewardship that is available. We had it actually certified in West Ohio, but it's then available fairly into the conference. It's interesting. The whole focus of that really is developing continental people to look after their church and their community.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy duty what they've done in West Ohio. The lay servant academies, West Ohio now has an approved curriculum in creation care that they teach to their lay servant people. So we're running out of time.
One of the things that I realized that I maybe am interpreting evangelism too narrowly, because I realized that there's been a kind of internal evangelism we've done at Mount Olivet, and that's we have a number of environmental scientists, environmental lawyers that are members or constituents of our church. One who heads an EPA program on water pollution in the plastic pollutions in the ocean. got him to come present, and we got way more people than when we showed the film, because he knew a lot of people there too, and they wanted to hear him. Another man heads the program on at the National Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife Service on elephants, and got him to come and filled half the sanctuary on a weeknight with people that wanted to hear about his elephant work. Another man who is a climate scientist working for one of the environmental groups came, and we got another group. So all three of them rarely sit in Sunday worship, but they all got to come and talk as church about what they did, and they were very reflective about how their faith informed what they were doing in their work life, even if they're not in church 52 weeks a year.
We, as a United Methodist Church, and Episcopalians, Catholics can all say the same thing, we have incredible people sitting in our pews on Sunday mornings. Incredible people. We have climate people, we have science people, we have political people, unbelievable people, and we don't know who they are. I just preached at a church in Virginia last Sunday, had a retired climate scientist in there, and a guy that had spent the last 20 years doing reforestation in Haiti. These are people all over our congregations. Time is up, but can you give us 5 minutes since we have a longer, I want to this is a fun thing to do.
You can get copies of our report over here.
I just want to run down what some other churches are doing and have been doing. An interfaith dialogue, policy advocacy work, energy audits, direct caring for creation, like for example, an eelgrass restoration project in the Chesapeake Bay was one. Stream monitoring, invasive species removal, all that stuff. Farms, gardens, mission partnerships with churches in other parts of the world, particularly that might be struggling because of climate change. One church did recycling stuff, but before they put the bins in all the classrooms of the church, they sent them to the youth group and they said, paint these bins, decorate them. So they painted the bins all kind of crazy colors, and then one Sunday morning, they lined them up against the altar of the church in worship. And in the worship service, they had a blessing of the bin service as a way of making recycling a part of who we are as Christians. Getting rid of styrofoam, of course. A season of creation. Some churches are doing a season of creation, 4 Sundays in a row, usually in the summer, early fall. I talked about the church that wanted to be a beacon. Bring your ugly mug to church Sunday in an effort to get rid of styrofoam coffee cups. Just creative stuff. Getting children outside. That's a ministry of the creation care team, is to get children outside. Some of this is too Virginia specific. Carbon footprint calculations, vacation Bible school curriculum, a waste watchers group in a congregation, doing trash audits, creation fairs, electronic recycling, UMCOR, fair trade, coffee, tea, chocolate sales in a congregation, shifting to responsible cleaning products, Bible studies. We've talked about green tips in the bulletin or newsletter, replacing windows in old congregations, shifting to LED light bulbs, automatic cutoffs, on and on and on and on and on. Lots more stuff. But one I'm going to tell you about, particularly because Carl is here. So we had a church in Virginia, River Road United Methodist Church, decided to redo its education wing or fellowship hall or something. And Carl, who's a member of the church and a green building consultant, was on the committee. And he told me, he said, I've been there for 20 years and it was like pulling teeth to get my own people to do anything green. But they did do a little bit green. Among other things, they put waterless urinals in the men's rooms. And about a year later, a guy named Dave Short was new to Richmond, visiting churches. He and his wife and 2 daughters came to River Road, walked in, never been to the church, didn't know the preacher, knew nothing about the church. Walked into the church. Dave said, I have to go to the restroom, sent his wife and kids into the sanctuary. He goes into the men's room, he pees in that waterless urinal and reads the plaque that says this urinal is saving this facility up to 40,000 gallons of water a year. He leaves the bathroom, he goes, sits down by his wife in the sanctuary and says, we're joining this church. Because here's a church that cares about God's creation. And he's still there, and he became a part of the creation care team. That's waterless urinal evangelism. It's great. And these two, there are 2 posters over here that came from a creation care ministry team in Missouri. And so they wanted to make sure that everybody knew what was going on. So they did these big visuals that they could put up in different places in the church. Okay, thank you so much.